Long before modern humans strode confidently across the African savanna, three apex predators reigned over the ancient wilderness. First came the saber-toothed. Second were the colossal prehistoric crocodiles, lurking silently in rivers and marsh. But the most unexpected predator, a third rival, Dinopithecus, engines a gargantuan baboon, twice as large as the biggest baboons alive today. These massive primates didn't follow the path of intellect. Rather than evolving smarter brains, they developed brute strength, more brawn than brain, built for battle, not strategy. Fossil remains uncovered in South Africa's deep cave systems paint a harrowing picture of deadly coexistence. Our earliest ancestors were trapped between predators on all fronts. Dinopithecus left tooth marks in human skulls. Crocodiles dominated the wetlands, and it may have clashed directly with humans or worse, preyed on our young. So what happened to them? Did our ancestors outwit these massive beasts, or simply outlast them? The answers lie buried under layers of sediment and stone, hidden in the limestone caves of South Africa. Solving this puzzle is like assembling a fractured jigsaw with scattered, unmatching fragments, bits of crania, shattered jaws, and solitary teeth, unlike any known species. That's the riddle that confounded paleontologists in the early 20th century. In 1937, British paleontologist Robert Broom examined a peculiar skull fragment and knew right away. This wasn't from any baboon species we recognize. The shape was familiar, but the sheer size defied logic. This was no ordinary primate. It was something far more formidable. Eventually, researchers named it Dinopithecus, engines Latin for enormous, fearsome ape. But naming the creature was only part of the challenge. The remains were scant, some jaws here, bits of skulls there. It was nearly impossible to place them within the primate lineage. The immense size hinted at something unique, yet for years there wasn't enough data to confirm its role. Fortunately, nature preserved its secrets. Over millennia, the cave networks in South Africa became natural time vaults. Creatures that died near sinkholes or were dragged into caves were slowly encased in layers of sediment. As mineral waters flowed, bone turned to fossil. These caves became treasured troves of ancient primate remains, each discovery unlocking a chapter of Earth's forgotten history. But unearthing them was no easy task. Scientists operated in narrow, perilous chambers, carefully chipping away stone that held ancient bones hostage. Each fossil revealed a piece of a lost world, an era when muscle overshadowed mind, and survival teetered on a knife's edge. Using dental tools, air scribes, and even acid baths, paleontologists painstakingly extracted those bones from their rocky prisons, one sliver at a time. Each fossil shard needed delicate handling, like touching antique glass, since the passing millennia had left these ancient remnants brittle. Initially, the scientific world wasn't sure what to make of them. Some proposed these bones belonged to oversized baboons, nothing more than exaggerated versions of species we already recognized. But others noticed features that didn't quite align with anything alive today, suggesting this could represent something entirely different. The skeletal remains hinted at primates potentially twice the size of modern baboons. Still, without complete skeletons, no limbs, no vertebrae, estimating their real dimensions remained pure speculation. That uncertainty began to clear when researchers turned to comparisons with living primates. By analyzing the relationship between skull size and body weight in today's baboons, they extrapolated those ratios to envision what Dinopithecus may have looked like. Using digital reconstruction and modern scanning techniques, the resulting models were astonishing. Some adult males may have weighed up to 170 pounds, a stark contrast to the 33 to 42 pound range seen in today's olive baboons. And when these ancient primates stood upright, they weren't just larger, they were intimidating. But their massive build led scientists to a cascade of new questions. What enabled such large primates to thrive? What made up their diet? Were they predators, foragers, or generalist feeders with wide-ranging appetites? And where did they fit within the broader primate lineage, especially given their coexistence with early human ancestors? After years of piecing together scattered fossil material, research Dinopithecus wasn't a mysterious offshoot, was an enormous relative of a familiar face. The modern this insight came from exhaustive anatomical comparisons, aligning skull features of extinct and modern species to trace shared traits and deviations. It resembled assembling a jigsaw puzzle with most of the pieces missing. What began in uncertainty evolved into a contentious debate. Some scholars argued Dinopithecus was simply an unusually large type within the Papio genus. That same genus includes modern baboon, yet others believed the distinctions were great enough to justify placing it in a separate genus altogether. This wasn't idle taxonomic hair-splitting, it reflected genuine disagreement over how to categorize primate lineages based on limited data, much like sketching a family portrait with just a few known faces. Ultimately, experts positioned Dinopithecus within the Papionine tribe, a wider classification that includes species such as baboons, mandrills, drills, mangabes, and geladas monkeys, admired for strength, complex societies, and adaptability. Dinopithecus shared some notable traits with today's baboons: elongated snouts, teeth adapted for grinding fibrous vegetation, and bodies suited for terrestrial movement rather than tree-dwelling agility. Yet this creature wasn't merely an enlarged copy of present-day baboons. Fossil analysis confirmed it came from an early, now vanished limb of the primate evolutionary tree lineage that once roamed prehistoric Africa, then disappeared into extinction, leaving behind only scattered clues in the earth. What made them different? For one thing, they lacked several signature traits you'd typically associate with modern baboons, like facial faucets, the shallow grooves beside the snout, and the maxillary ridges, those prominent bony lines along the upper jaw. These distinctions weren't just superficial, they were evolutionary, indicating that Dinopithecus had branched off along its own unique trajectory over millions of years, likely shaped by specific environmental conditions and dietary pressures. This kind of divergence offers vital insights into how various primate lineages responded to Africa's ever-changing terrain during the Pleistocene, a time marked by volatile climates, expanding savannas, and intense ecological rivalry. In time, scientists reached a broader agreement. Dinopithecus wasn't merely an oversized baboon, it was a distinct evolutionary trial, a powerful offshoot that once roamed the same landscapes as early humans. And there weren't fleeting anomalies in the evolutionary timeline. They thrived for hundreds of millennia before vanishing, leaving only cryptic traces sealed in layers of prehistoric stone. The breakthrough came with comparative studies of their skulls. Applying scaling methods used on living primates, researchers concluded that the average male Dinopithecus weighed around 101 pounds, with some individuals possibly reaching 170. That's nearly twice the size of modern baboons, which typically max out at about 80 pounds. That kind of bulk redefined our view of primate. This wasn't a creature optimized for intellect, it was built for strength. Proof that in some habitats, muscle outweighed brain as a survival strategy. Yet rebuilding the story of Dinopithecus has proven to be anything but simple. To date, paleontologists have only recovered partial skulls, jaw fragments, and scattered teeth. There are no limb bones, no vertebrae, no pelvis drawing to picture Dinopithecus in motion. To understand how it behaved or interacted with its world is like trying to reconstruct an entire film from a few brief scenes. And here's the twist: we still don't really know how this heavyweight primate got around. Did it walk like a typical baboon, mostly grounded? Or did it somehow retain the ability to climb trees despite its massive frame? Without the postcranial bones, those beyond the skull, we're left guessing. Yet one fact is undeniable: Dinopithecus didn't just adapt to its wild environment. It now forces us to revisit long-held ideas about what our primate cousins are, perhaps our own ancestors, were capable of in the raw, unfiltered wilderness of prehistoric Africa. So what exactly did Dinopithecus look like? What was its form? These questions continue to intrigue scientists, largely because the fossil record remains incomplete. No intact skeletons, only scattered remains. That's why researchers had to innovate and turn to indirect evidence. Enter modern technology. With advanced 3D scanning, scientists generated precise digital replicas of fossil fragments. These digital reconstructions captured fine anatomical details and measurements, enabling experts to virtually reassemble the animal, one piece at a time. They were able to rotate, align, and digitally reconstruct the skull in ways the delicate original bones could never allow. But their work didn't end there. Researchers also studied where muscles once connected to the bone, offering insight into jaw mechanics and biting power. It turns out Dinopithecus packed an incredibly forceful bite. Every scan, every high-resolution image, provided yet another clue in the intense pursuit of evolutionary understanding, like piecing together a forensic puzzle to visualize this ancient primate. Comparative anatomy added even more depth. By comparing skull size to overall body mass in living baboons, scientists created scaling equations to estimate how Dinopithecus was built. The proportions of its cranium and teeth offered solid benchmarks, and step by step, the blurry image of this long-extinct creature began to come into focus. To understand its diet, researchers turned to microscopic marks left on its teeth. What they found was revealing. Dinopithecus ate similarly to modern yellow baboons, fruits, insects, and possibly small vertebrates. It was a dietary opportunist, ready to consume nearly anything it could find. By combining all this data, researchers concluded that Dinopithecus was a terrestrial quadruped, robust and low to the ground like today's baboons. But on a much grander scale, it likely had a wide, powerful torso and strong limbs to support its bulk. Its skull was equipped with large canine teeth and a jaw designed not just for grinding, but likely for display and defense as well. Because of its sheer mass, it probably spent most of its life on the ground. Still, it may have climbed trees occasionally, especially when food or threats demanded it. But don't be fooled, this was a terrestrial heavyweight adapted for life in a competitive, unforgiving landscape. With adult males possibly tipping the scales at 170 pounds, Dinopithecus was no easy target. It could intimidate smaller carnivores, but still needed to remain vigilant. After all, ancient Africa teemed with apex predators always on the hunt. Much like modern baboons, the size gap between males and females, what researchers call sexual dimorphism, suggests complex group dynamics, including dominant males, challengers, and layered social hierarchies. In the chaotic ecosystems of the Pliocene and Pleistocene, Dinopithecus didn't merely exist. It played a specific ecological role in a fast-moving world of hunters and hunted. Between 5.3 million and just under 12,000 years ago, Africa wasn't a flat savanna stretching endless light. It was a rich mosaic of shifting habitats, from open grasslands to dense woodlands, brimming with massive animals locked in a struggle for food and dominance. Amid that ever-changing backdrop, Dinopithecus carved out its place. It never ruled the food chain, but it wasn't an easy meal either. It occupied a narrow space between predator and prey, always aware, always adapting to whatever threats or opportunities came its way. Ecologists refer to this as an intermediate trophic level. In simple terms, Dinopithecus occupied the middle rung in the savage hierarchy of predators and prey. Weighing in at roughly 170 pounds for the largest males, this massive primate needed high daily energy intake, forcing it into constant caloric combat with other hefty omnivores and herbivores. Such relentless pressure shaped every aspect of its existence. Unlike modern baboons, Dinopithecus had to evolve distinctive survival tactics, ones tailored to its formidable build and the dangers of its environment. And those dangers were abundant. Ancient Africa was teeming with killers at the top of the food chain. Three predators, in particular, posed grave threats. The saber, whose deadly fangs were tailor-made to pierce primate skulls. Enormous prehistoric crocodiles that made every visit to the riverbank a potential death sentence. And astonishingly, Dinopithecus itself. Fossil records indicate it wasn't merely a passive forager. It might have actively hunted sizable animals. Still, brute force didn't render it untouchable. Craniums of other primates bear undeniable puncture wounds from Dinophilis. Attacks, precise, fatal bites driven deep into bone. Even a heavyweight primate had reason to remain ever vigilant, even in sleep, and its rivals weren't limited to animals. Archaeological and fossil clues suggest that Dinopithecus might have competed directly with early humans. At a site linked to Acheulean tool use in Kenya, researchers discovered butchered remains of nearly 100 Geladiza primate relatives of today's baboon. The bones showed unmistakable signs of human butchery. This find points to a time when early humans and giant primates, like Dinopithecus, roamed the same territory, competing for food, space, and survival. That rivalry becomes even more apparent in the fossil record. Skeletal remains from both species have surfaced within identical stratigraphic layers inside South African cave systems. That's not just coexistence, it's cohabitation in the same time frame. Such close quarters strongly suggest frequent and possibly hostile interactions. They likely fought over food sources, water access, and shelter. Territorial disputes may have occurred, and in some instances, one might have hunted the other. Here were two clever, socially complex primates, sharing a landscape yet navigating survival in drastically different ways. Early humans relied on cooperation. They crafted tools, hunted in coordinated groups, and distributed resources collectively. Dinopithecus, by contrast, depended on its sheer size and muscle-an evolutionary path that emphasized force over finesse. These opposing strategies may have accelerated adaptations in both lineages, but for Dinopithecus, that very evolutionary pressure might have set the stage for its eventual demise. Extinction is rarely the result of a single cause, and its case was no exception. Evidence shows Dinopithecus first emerged about 2.5 million years ago, in the latter part of the Pliocene epoch, and endured into the depths of the Pliocene. That's a remarkable span, showcasing its ability to adapt and persist. But by roughly 1.5 million years ago, it vanishes from the fossil timeline. So what took place? The Pleistocene wasn't a forgiving era. It was a time of dramatic climate upheavals, swinging violently between glacial freezes and brief warm spells, alternating rainy seasons and devastating droughts. Rainfall patterns shifted, ecosystems collapsed and reformed. Now imagine being a species perfectly adapted to dense, shady forests only to emerge one era and find your world transformed into a sun-scorched savanna. That's precisely what unfolded. Paleoclimatic records reveal a sweeping expansion of grasslands and a corresponding decline in forested areas, especially during critical phases of the Dinopithecus timeline. For a primate reliant on a particular diet, this spelled disaster. These massive baboons required enormous caloric intake to sustain themselves. We're talking about up to 170 pounds of muscular bulk, far from low maintenance. But as the foods they depended on began to vanish, their dietary options grew dangerously slim. Unlike modern baboons that are flexible omnivores, Dinopithecus had a narrower palate. That specialization, once a strength, quickly turned into a fatal flaw. In the end, it wasn't just lurking predators or human encroachment that sealed their fate. It was a lethal combination. Rapid climate transformation, vanishing habitats, and shrinking food sources. These converging pressures gradually pushed this towering primate toward the brink and eventually over the edge into extinction. And perhaps one of the most chilling pieces of the puzzle, it may have involved us, early Homo sapiens. At a site associated with the Kulean hand-axe culture in Kenya, archaeologists uncovered the remains of roughly 100 gelatus close relatives of today's baboon. But it wasn't just the volume of bones that raised eyebrows, it was their condition. Nearly all were butchered, and most belonged to young individuals. This strongly suggests early humans adopted a calculated strategy. Focus on the bypassing dangerous adults, they selectively thinned out future generations. No full-on battles needed, just a quiet erosion of reproductive continuity. If early humans used similar tactics on Dinopithecus, the results would have been devastating. By targeting the young, they could disrupt troop stability and reproduction without ever needing to confront the fearsome alpha males head-on. Dinopithecus didn't vanish overnight. Its extinction was a slow descent driven by compounded forces, shifting climates, restricted diets, ecological strain, and the quiet, persistent pressure of human activity. So, what wisdom can we extract from the downfall of this extinct colossus? By examining the fate of Dinopithecus, we gain sharper insight into the pivotal choices that shaped our species' rise. It's a reflection of diverging evolutionary paths, some bold, some adaptive, but not all sustainable. And in understanding why they failed, we better grasp how we succeeded. At the heart of their story is a haunting lesson. Brains alone don't guarantee survival. Dinopithecus was mighty, but it couldn't pivot fast enough. Meanwhile, our ancestors, less imposing but more nimble, found ways to endure. YouTube thinks you'll enjoy the video showing up on your screen. Tap to keep exploring, and I'll meet you there.